If getting your child out the door every morning feels like a negotiation, you're definitely not alone. Maybe it's turning off the iPad, leaving the park, getting dressed for school, starting homework, going to bed. Sometimes it's something as simple as putting on socks. For some kids, transitions are just hard, and they can be especially difficult for kids who already struggle with things like ADHD, anxiety, or sensory processing disorder. What's frustrating for parents is that you can do everything you're supposed to do, the countdowns, the visual schedules, the reward charts, the consequences, and still feel like you're having the same battle every day. So I want to talk about transitions a little differently, because sometimes what looks like a behavior problem is also a regulation problem. Think about what we're actually asking a child's brain to do during a transition. They have to stop what they're doing, disengage their attention, process what you're asking, figure out what comes next, organize their body, and then shift into an entirely different activity. That ability to shift from one task or expectation to another is sometimes called cognitive flexibility or set shifting. And it relies heavily on executive function. And executive function is still developing throughout childhood and adolescence. So when I say, hey, put your shoes on, we have to go, that sounds like one simple request to me. But it may not feel simple to that child. They might have to pull themselves away from something they're completely absorbed in, find their socks, deal with the seam that bothers them, find their shoes, remember where they're going, worry about what's going to happen when they get there. And if their system is already overwhelmed, that relatively small request can become the thing that pushes them over the edge. That's where I think understanding the nervous system can be really helpful. I often describe the autonomic nervous system using a gas pedal and brake pedal. Your sympathetic nervous system is essentially your gas pedal. It helps you become alert and activated, and it's part of your fight or flight response. Your parasympathetic nervous system helps with the other side of that equation: rest, recovery, digestion, and regulation. We need both. The goal isn't to get rid of the gas pedal. The goal is to have a nervous system that can appropriately speed up when it needs to and then settle back down when the stressor is gone. Some kids seem to have much harder time making that shift. They're already running at an 8 or 9 out of 10, and then we ask them to change activities. Now suddenly they're at a 10. And what we see on the outside might be screaming, crying, shutting down, running away, refusing to get dressed, or completely losing it over something that seems incredibly small. But the thing that triggered the meltdown isn't always the whole story. The socks might just be the last straw. This can also explain why transitions can be particularly challenging for kids with ADHD, anxiety, or sensory difficulties, even though those are really different things. A child with ADHD might be intensely focused on something they enjoy and have a genuinely difficult time disengaging and redirecting their attention. A child with anxiety might already be thinking 3 steps ahead. What's going to happen when we get there? Who's going to be there? What if something goes wrong? And a child with sensory challenges may be processing things that barely register for the rest of us. The lights are too bright. Their clothes don't feel right. The house is loud. Somebody's rushing them. Their shoes feel uncomfortable. And now we're telling them, come on, we have to go. That doesn't mean boundaries aren't important. It doesn't mean every behavior should simply be excused. It means that if we only address the behavior, we might be missing part of what's driving it. So, what can you actually do? First, make transitions predictable. Give your child a heads up. Instead of suddenly saying, turn it off, we're leaving, try 10 more minutes, then we're going to put our shoes on and head out. Timers and visual schedules can be really helpful for some kids. Second, create routines. If mornings happen in roughly the same order every day, there are fewer decisions and fewer surprises. Over time, the routine itself becomes a cue for what happens next. Third, use movement. Sometimes a child who has been sitting or concentrating for a long time benefits from getting their body involved before moving into the next task. Depending on the child, that might be walking, stretching, jumping, pushing against the wall, or another simple physical activity. Fourth, this is a big one, protect sleep. Everything is harder when a child is exhausted. attention, emotional regulation, impulse control, sensory tolerance, flexibility, all of it. And finally, pay attention to your own regulation. I know that's easier said than done when you've asked someone to put on their shoes 12 times and you're already late. But kids often take cues from us. If I get louder, faster, and more frustrated, I may unintentionally add more stress to a child who's already overwhelmed. Sometimes slowing ourselves down helps them slow down too. Now, what happens when you're already doing all of this? You have routines, you give the warnings, you prioritize sleep, you've worked with their teachers, maybe you've tried therapy or other forms of support, and transitions are still disrupting your family every single day. That's when I think it's worth asking a bigger question. How well is this child adapting to stress in general? At Foundations Chiropractic, that's something we spend a lot of time thinking about. We sometimes use the phrase perfect storm to describe kids who have experienced multiple stressors throughout development and seem to have difficulty settling into a more regulated state. Every child's story is different, and I don't think it's helpful to blame one event or one parent for why a child is struggling. Instead, we're interested in the bigger picture. What has this child experienced? How are they sleeping? How do they handle sensory input? How do they respond to stress? How easily can they move from an activated state back toward calm? We combine that information with the child's history, what the parents are seeing at home, and our examination to help guide our chiropractic care. When chiropractic care is appropriate, we use gentle, specific adjustments with the goal of supporting the child's overall nervous system function and adaptability. And one of the things I love hearing from parents isn't necessarily everything changed overnight. It's the smaller things. We got out the door without a fight today. They handled a change in plans. Bedtime wasn't a 2-hour battle. We're starting to see more good days. Those little changes can mean a lot to a family. So if transitions are difficult in your house, start with the basics. Predictability, routines, movement, sleep, and staying as regulated as you can yourself. But if you feel like you're doing all the right things and your child is still struggling, it may be worth looking at the bigger picture rather than simply adding another reward chart. If you'd like us to take a look at your child's nervous system and see whether Foundations might be a good fit for your family, send us a message or use the link in our bio to get started.